Уважаемые коллеги, я предлагаю начать. Занимаем место.
Dear colleagues, I suggest that we should get started. So please take your seats.
Уважаемые коллеги,
Dear colleagues, let's start our meeting. This is the meeting of the Committee of the Russian Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs and Sverdlovsky Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs. And the subject of our meeting will be professional engineering activities within the framework of 6 technological paradigm. Today, the world is on the verge of the 6th technological paradigm, and this paradigm is just taking its shape in the United States, China, and Japan. And it is focused on using high-tech technologies. We're thinking about biotechnologies, gene engineering, quantum technologies, fusion technologies, and all these technologies are focused on creating quantum computers, for example, or better versions of artificial intelligence. And finally, give to the human being the new level of development. And forecasts tell us that if we keep existing technological and economical pace of development, then the sixth technological paradigm will finally take its shape in the 2020, and it will be on its peak in 2040. And in 2020, or by that time, we'll face the new scientific and technological revolution. And all the previously mentioned technological areas will form the foundation of this revolution. In the United States of America, within the framework of the 5th technological paradigm, they've got 50% of their industrial capacity up to this level, and up to 5% of industrial capacity, matching the level of 6th technological paradigm. In Russia, only 10% of our capacity is on the 5th level, up to 50% on the 4th level, and 1/3% of industrial capacity is on the 3rd level. We need to get a better idea, how do we get from the 4th level directly to on the 6th level? What do we do to achieve that? So let's discuss professional engineering activity, and let's discuss this issue at our meeting. Dear Arkady, before I give you the floor, I would like to take notice of the role that the Federation Council is currently taking in setting the key for the discussion of engineering activity and outlining regulatory framework for engineering activities. That includes drafting the law on professional engineering and professional engineers. That law has been debated for several years, and it was developed by a big group of engineers. And dear Arkady, I would like to give the floor to you. Good morning, dear friends and colleagues. This is not the first time when we meet each other under the auspices of Innопроm exhibition. And a lot of you took part in this work last year, and we discussed fundamental points of the law on engineers and engineering activities. And our colleague has rightly pointed out that there is a special committee currently formed under the Federation Council, and that committee is responsible for drafting laws and regulatory framework on engineering and engineering activities. And this committee is moving in a step-by-step fashion to better understanding and better clarity in this area and practical implementation of all the laws which are needed, just to achieve some more clarity in this area. As compared to the situation of previous year, we have made quite a lot of progress. As of today, we have split this work into several stages, and the working group under my control has decided not to put all these aspects into one law, but again adopt a step-by-step approach. And we had several discussions of the law on professional engineering, and we have outlined several issues which we currently face, and we will discuss them here. And I wouldn't want to be in a situation when this law attracts too much attention for its so the law is currently ready to be discussed, and the law is currently ready to be put forward in front of the governmental bodies. After discussion of the law, we have made substantial changes to the wording, and currently we would like to, let's say, put the finishing touch on the draft of the law and finally discuss the ideology of this law with the professional community and actually start the approval of this law with the governmental bodies. I will answer a question which I heard several times before. People say, now you are trying to resolve an issue which does not solely fall into the responsibility of Minister of Industry, because it has a lot to do with Minister of Education as well. But mind the fact that when we started discussing these things, we realized that professional education or higher education and postgraduate professional education and professional growth, these are the things which cannot be considered separately. There was a lot of turmoil created in this area by the Bolognian system. Bolognian system is not very well respected in our educational area yet, because all these magister and bachelor degrees, they are creating some misunderstanding, because there is no clarity regarding the level of education and who is responsible for what and what is the level of qualification. But I think we made a very clear distinction in this issue. When we discussed this law, we tried to leave aside the issues of public education. We're not planning any revolution in the educational area. We're not planning to retreat. We're not planning to advance upon this Bolognian system. We take it as it is. And now we are talking more about postgraduate education for an engineer, about the issues related to him or her professional growth, about the issues related to professional recognition, and about prioritizing the competences of an engineer who has just graduated from a university. So that was the law is mainly about. So the law is focused on appraising professional engineers, or what that appraisal process should be. And adoption of this law also means serious amendments to existing regulations and laws. So it is about splitting responsibility and splitting the competences and prioritizing the competences of potential engineers. That's a very important issue. And we do believe that in future, our engineers, in the professional perspective, will be a lot more self-sufficient, and they will have more responsibility. They will be able to take on more issues and make decisions themselves rather than interact with the numerous bodies. That means serious responsibility indeed, but that also outlines certain growth perspective. So we believe that that will create momentum to further develop our engineering activity, because I think that this is the bit that we're missing most of all. We need ideas, and these ideas will be put forward by engineering business unit. And the business unit, in our case, is our professional engineers. And they will be the main subject of our discussion today. And another subject which we will touch upon today as well, it is about fostering development of small and medium enterprises in engineering area. But there is one more thing, which is extremely important, and it is extremely important in the context of adoption of this law. I would say that we have pretty good level of engineering education. However, we're mostly left unrepresented in the international market. So there are places where our engineers are employed, but it happens on a, I would say, on a sporadic basis. And that means quite serious consequences for us. I will say we're building nuclear power stations in certain countries without having our engineers properly certified in line with the laws of those countries. And if the law gets changed all of a sudden, or if authorities of that country will take a different approach to us and they will question the quality of products which we produce, there will be a completely different situation. In order to be able to actively work at external markets today, in order to be able to offer proper quality engineering services, we need the classification system for our engineering activities. We need to have agreements in place between engineering chambers of Russia and engineering chambers of those countries where we plan to operate. That's an important issue. And I think this is another point which supports the need of adopting the law on engineering activity. So I think I've made an introductory speech to our discussion, and I would request you to observe the time limits for your presentation, since we only have an hour and a half to discuss this. I think that we'll give 15 minutes to the first speaker, as Igor Viktorovich Mesherin will be telling us in a more detailed fashion about the law on professional engineers. So he will have 15 minutes, and I will request all other speakers to observe the 7-minute time limit, since we would like to have some time for discussing these issues. Well, so much for the introduction. Let's get started. Any questions regarding the time limits? If no questions, then Mr. Mesherin, the floor is yours. Mr. Mesherin is the president of the National Engineering Chamber and also one of those who drafted the law on professional engineering activity. Dear colleagues, so why do we need the draft of this law? I think you have all, in the mass media, you've all seen messages regarding the fact that we have to ensure technological development of our country. There was the fleet commander who said in the year of 2000, our Navy does not have a problem. It just faces a number of tasks. Okay, we can adopt the same approach. We face a number of tasks now. In the 90s, the Soviet Union accounted for 29% of the total amount of export of high-tech products. Currently, Russia accounts merely for 1%. So the question is, why is that, and how can we change this situation? We have analyzed all those aspects, and we have engineers, we have engineering activity, but in the current regulatory framework, we do not have concepts like technology, technological design, engineer, and engineering activities. So engineering chamber has asked itself a question: what is engineering activity? What are the issues? And the main issue is that the regulatory framework has become out of date, because currently we have the same norms and regulations as were in place during the fourth innovational wave. So it's even more inferior than the one we had in the USSR. And now we are working within the framework of the fifth innovational wave, or fifth technological paradigm. So, and I would say that our engineers work as serfs. So it's engineering serfdom. What is the situation that we have in the world? You graduate from a university as an engineer, then you develop your career, and a career-oriented engineer would like to take the CEO's position. So what is the option? He either has to wait until this position becomes vacant, or he has to form his own company and start working in the open market. So if we strictly follow all the points of existing laws and regulations, then it will be impossible to set up an engineering company, simply because orders for engineering activities are distributed through tenders, and tenders require that you provide references. How can you provide a reference if you're a new company? All over the world, there is an opportunity to provide personal references, like personal references from those engineers who work for this company. And there is a special procedure designed for that purpose. We have analyzed laws and regulations of foreign countries, and we have realized that all these countries, including Kazakhstan and Belarus and Ukraine to a certain extent, their regulatory framework have the concept of engineering and engineers. And this concept is missing from our laws and regulations. So that's an issue. And people keep saying that we've got to ensure export of our products. Arkady has pointed out at what problems our leading exporter has, like Rosatom is a leading exporter of our high-tech products. And we are well aware of the fact that foreign engineers are openly and freely working in our market. And we believe that today, International World Trade Organization is not taking a fair position towards Russian engineering, because we are harmonizing our standards, but that harmonization in effect means adoption of foreign standards. Try to use our standards and try to work with them in the foreign market. Immediately you will have a number of issues which will act as barriers for export of our high-tech products. As was pointed out, high school establishments graduate bachelors and masters. And in 10 years from now, the majority of our engineers will not have a degree of an engineer. And there is no mechanism, and there is no tool for certifying engineers. And another issue, which is even more pressing, social elevators, social lifts are not working in engineering. We are losing the best people at the point of the state certification or state examination, because these kids who go to school, they don't pick up physics as their major subject of study. In the Russian Empire, when you graduated as an engineer, you immediately acquired the grade of nobility. But the problem in the Russian Empire was the fact that bigger number of people did not have access to engineering education. So the number of engineers was quite small, and entrepreneurship activity was also, the scale of it was quite small, because engineers only worked in mining business, in military industrial complex, and this is why people are saying that Alexander Popov, is a Russian engineer, cannot justify that he was the first to invent radio as opposed to Marconi. In 1928, in the USSR, the educational system has changed, and the number of engineers has increased, and the social elevators were working properly. After the Second World War, even bigger number of people got access to education. the number of engineers has increased substantially, and social elevators and social lifts started failing because an engineer has lost the flow of fashion. Because when you are an engineer, you're just a mere engineer. There's nothing special about it. Currently in the Russian Federation, we still have a higher educational system, which is quite good. We believe that it is one of the best in the world. We develop entrepreneurship competence among our people. We are adopting military technologies for peaceful use. We have a lot of engineers, and social elevators, unfortunately, are not working at all. And based on recruiting agency information, an engineer is earning less than a driver.
So what about young people? Will they want to work as engineers, or they will prefer to work as drivers? I mean, they want to make money, so that's an issue. If you look at countries with developed markets of engineering services, so let's look at Russia in that list. No data on Russia in this list, because engineering activities are missing as official terms. So how many people are working in that sphere, how many taxes are collected in that area, it's not so clear. So let's look at graduates in engineering majors. So they report 194,000 engineers graduating every year. But our employers tell us it's very difficult to find qualified engineers. We know that productivity of labor is very low in this country, and qualified engineers that we do have, they are not fully employed. So they could do more work, in fact, to do more with what they can. So maybe we can have fewer engineers, but we can better use them. So also, they say that wonderful developmental institutions that the state created, Skolkovo, Russian Venture Fund, Rosnana, others, also, so they provide lending, preferential lending, so they money back for design documents. So then they tell us, okay, we created all those things, we created the conditions, it's fertile soil, but nothing is growing in that soil. Why? Because you need to put seeds in that soil for something to grow. So, and we want to improve our competitiveness, and we want to improve competitiveness of our engineers. So if we look at the legal framework, so the law on engineering activities is related to other laws, like the law on education, etc. But we understand there's a great impact of the law on technical regulation. There's law on architectural activities and urban code, which should be amended. It's being discussed in the Ministry of Construction. And there's civil code, of course, there where Chapter 5 should include engineer as also as a creative activity. So engineer should be freelance, creative activity, kind of activity. So if you have an engineer carries with them engineering thinking, and it's creative kind of thinking. So if you give an assignment to 100 different engineers, they will develop 100 different solutions. They will not be identical. So, but sometimes we think results will be the same, but it's not so. So legal framework. So it's about responsibility of those who work in the engineering sphere, engineers and legal entities that are dealing in this area, and also regulators should be covered. So main types of engineering activities: how do you create competencies? What about professional associations of engineers and standards of professional activities in engineering? A lot has been said about that, and we're saying that there's a certain barrier. So sometimes engineers become employers themselves, so that makes a difference. So that's why we use this platform of the Russian Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs, because engineering activity can become a business activity. An engineer becomes an employer, so he's no longer an employer. So we should use a special approach, and professional standards should provide this opportunity to engineers. So this is what our Chamber of Engineers is doing exactly. This activity should be ensured mandatorily, and also copyright should exist on the results of the engineering activities. I'm not talking about patent law. When you invent something and you don't get anything for your inventive activities, but we should protect those know-hows. We should understand how do you create something based on those drafts. So then we should discuss measures of government support for engineering activities, how to provide incentives to engineering personnel, etc., how to remunerate engineers. We think that one of the most important points in engineering activities is so-called ethics. So an engineer should not deliberately do something if you know that consequences will be harmful to people or environment, or to third parties, or to the client. So we need to create comfortable conditions for human beings. So our activities should be aimed at strengthening engineering potential of our country, and we suppose that as a result, competitiveness of Russian intellectual products will be improved. So just like in the Soviet days, exports of engineering products, we should make sure that we export those kind of things. When engineers come and when they work on projects and on research, they're involved in developing industrial products for then Russian manufacturers and contractors. So they're classmates from school, from university, work in adjacent areas. So sometimes they talk about those people as just a small element in a large mechanism, but no, that's not exactly like that. You're like a bee that goes out to get a piece of honey and bring it back to put it together in a honeycomb. So I think the law should ensure that we all work together towards achieving this large goal. So first Vice President of the Chamber, Alexander Petrovich, will tell us about the structure of the law and some of the key issues covered there. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Igor Viktorovich. So, colleagues, do you have any questions? If you have any questions for our presenters, let's have a Q&A session in the end. So let's hear first all the presentations. I would like to give the floor to Alexander Petrovich Voronets, Director General of SRO, Svязь Telecom Project. Good morning, colleagues. I have my presentation there. I have a small presentation. I will not be focusing on my slides that much. It's not mine. So it's a federal draft of federal law on professional engineering activities. On professional engineers in the Russian Federation. Okay, I'll be flipping through the slides. All right. So let me be brief. I will focus on some problems because authors and those who have been thinking on this law at least, so they come back to the same basic points. So Arkady Mikhailovich brought up this important topic. So not to have collisions, not to have arguments, and not to enter the area of education and have collisions there. So I would like to mention a couple of points that we should keep in mind, and maybe they should help us avoid some problems, some external factors that exist out there. There are three of them. Just legal framework for engineering activities, competitive environment. An engineer oftentimes loses in that competition, and then financial and commercial conditions for engineering activities. If you have no money, have no funds, you cannot carry out an activity. So when Kudrin ceased to be Minister of Finances, and when he met with the business community, he said that, so if you have 8% interest rate for 3 years, in reality it's higher than that. He says it shouldn't be like this because it contradicts any logic of any kind of production. But 3% for 8 years is good. That's gives you a financial basis. So for engineering activities and for engineers, in those who work with their own group, well-established group, this is what it takes. So we talk about legal framework because I think other factors will take shape as soon as legal framework is in place. So, and some things come from practice, like knowledge, experience, qualification. So sometimes young people do not even focus on those things. They don't know how to solve these specific tasks. Okay, next slide, please. Let's go back. Some main items that we wanted to take into account in this draft law. So how do you find a professional engineer? How do you become a professional engineer? And how do you protect yourself from pseudo-engineers? So my colleagues told me protecting maybe it sounds too harsh. How do you decide, or how do you tell if that's a real engineer or a pseudo-engineer? Because we understand in our activities we have engineering tasks and non-engineering tasks. So an engineer can work in all types of facts and still be successful. But if you invite a person who's not qualified, an engineer, to work in engineering tasks, then it's going to be a disaster. So people deal with lots of organizational issues, and they don't have to be engineers. So we should be able to tell apart who are engineers and non-engineers, just businessmen, entrepreneurs, those who are managers, those who organize events. So that's why we have this notion of a pseudo-engineer. So this is today's engineer, or perhaps a person who's looking for a job. He says, I have a master's degree in engineering, but am I an engineer? Or how do I become an engineer? Maybe I'm not planning to become an engineer anymore. So this is the state of ambiguity. So we started our movement with a manifesto. It's published, National Chamber of Engineers. So one of the items in this manifesto, basically, it's a list of things that we would like to achieve, government support, consolidation of efforts, etc., etc. So it's not a one-pager exactly, but you can see it for yourself. Also, developing engineering standards. It's not about procedures per se, but we know that ethical norms play a significant role in engineering practices. So there's a standard on that. So our chamber has adopted it. It's not gonna. I don't think it's gonna change. You can read it. So engineers play a major role in the business, and ethical aspects are of importance. So here's what we would like to do. We would like to instill optimism in engineers. That's one of our goals. So we have an engineer in this hard hat on their head. So we find optimistic engineers on construction sites oftentimes because they know what they're doing and they know what the benefits of their activities are. So let me talk about the law itself. So this is a broad law. It covers a lot of things. There are many ideas in it. So we put a lot of things into it, some things that we consider to be unachievable. So we thought that we need to develop such a law, so it would be adopted, it would be working law. So this engineering environment would be shaped by it. It will take time for it to develop. So there are several points there, and general basic points. So legal status of a professional engineer and unified register of engineers. So about legal status, for instance, so GIPA notion is missing. So basically it's about chief engineer of a project or project's author. So our law employs no such notions. So who signs documents? Who can be trusted? Should you believe the CEO of the company? They're not and CEO is not an engineer oftentimes, or because the document contains a lot of engineering information. So who do you trust? So this is project's author. There's no such status. So legally it does not exist. So an attempt to separate engineering functions and non-engineering functions. So that's what we're trying to do here. Also unified register or roster of engineers. So once you complete your engineering education, the basic level of it, so you can be an engineer by education, or you can become a professional engineer and be part of the register, and consulting engineer. So this is the highest level of engineering. In the West, they have such a status, engineering consultant. So we have a consultant engineer here who's a member of our chamber, and he also contributed to the drafting of this law. Then organization of engineering activities. So we discussed that for a long time. What is an engineering activity? So natural persons, we would like to see an engineer as part of this work. So an engineer is a person, is a creative person who works in a group. It can be a small group or a larger group, but in any case, it's a creative group of people with different functions who work in different things. But in any case, so once this law describes an actual human person who's in the center of these activities, so which we think is important. So those terms, engineer, engineering activities, engineering companies, so too many terms. So you can call yourself an engineering company, but if you are just buying something from a supplier and sell it to another company, you're not an engineering company. This is something else. So things should be well defined. So in result, it's like in pharmaceuticals. You know, you can swallow a pill, but that pill can be produced by different manufacturers. So if you just buy some pills and resell them, and maybe packaging, you just do the packaging of the thing. It's not engineering. But of course, you can do this kind of business. You're entitled to it, but it's not engineering. So we tried to provide definitions to those terms. That was our idea. Okay, next section is a unified register of organizations that work in engineering sphere. So it's an open system. So it's an open type of system. So it's a must. It's part of the system. So once you get an engineering education, you can become part of that register. But then you can progress in your status. So we also look at a sophisticated mechanism of exiting that register. So in which cases it works? When do you need to abandon or leave that register? If you don't pay the fees?
So if you decide not to pay the fees voluntary, then you can get delisted, or if you violate ethical or professional norms. And these ethical or professional norms are outlined in our standards and laws. So there should be a way to take an engineer off that list, off that register, deregister it. Some people believe that we should hold a forum or committee in order to deregister something, and we have analyzed European experience, and it's an open system. You have an open register. If you violate the rules of the organization, you're out. That's very straightforward. And I think we should do the same for our engineering register. Engineering activity. We have minimized the number of articles in the law, but regarding engineering activities, we have project companies, project institutions, project and design bureaus. So, but in effect, any kind of an organization has a right to perform engineering activity, and it can claim copyright for the products. So this is almost it as far as the legal framework is concerned on engineering activity. And we also have a professional union of engineers, our engineering chamber. We have a number of various chambers. We have some are placed in Moscow. We have a chamber of engineers in the Urals. We believe that such union should be, has the right to exist, and it has to have very simple structure. So there is a national union, and this national union is based upon the regional unions, and you have a unified engineering register which unites all these units. So this is an open system, open and pretty straightforward. Openness is the key point of this. Regulatory activities. Yesterday somebody mentioned at the previous session that it is better that state does not get involved at all. I think this is misunderstanding. State has to be involved. The state should not interfere too deeply, but state has to be part of this activity. I don't think it is right to say that if state does not get involved, it is a lot simpler. We have discussed that in the Federation Council. So who should be involved in engineering activities from the state perspectives? So there are some options. We believe that federal executive body should be in place, and that federal executive body will be participating in shaping engineering environment, including shaping the benefits for engineers and everything else. So that should be the kind of involvement of a governmental body into engineering activities. And we have provided for that in our law. So now we have the chamber in place. Now we have a draft of the law, and we are trying to adopt the consequential approach. But we are also doing a lot of things in parallel. Your humble servant here always believed that he himself is an engineer. So there should be some transitional period for engineers. So you should not be keep asking yourself a question: am I an engineer or not? In line with in context of this new law. So there has to be more clarity there. And once the law is adopted, there will be a need to review or rethink something. So there are some transitional clauses also stipulated in the law. Should you have any questions, I'm ready to take your questions in the end of the session. But every time when we have people from professional community coming together, we have as many opinions as many people in the group. But for now, the law has already taken its shape, and the law can be discussed. It can be put forward for discussion in front of lawyers, and the lawyers can make some corrections. And one of the arguable parameters of the law is this. We talk to American engineering community, and I mean it, engineering community, and they follow this principle. Engineering company can be set up or a professional engineer, or at least professional engineers should have a controlling stake in this company. We have never thought about it. Why do they have this rule in place? Because an engineer has access to funding, and an engineer can have his own engineering business. In our case and in our environment, it is unlikely that once you have a good engineering idea, you immediately get access to funding. And I think that it should be important that in engineering activity we have as small number of intermediaries as possible. In some cases, you need to go through 2, 3, or even 4 intermediaries, in order to get to the customer. But it is always better to act directly. So there are key moments which we discuss. We work in an open forum. We get letters criticizing our points, and we get constructive criticism. Also, Alexander, thank you very much. Thank you. And I would like to give this floor to Anatoly Sysoev, who is the head of Committee on Industry and Interaction with Natural Monopolies. Anatoly is coming from Sverdlovsky Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs. So we need to have this law, by all means, and we need to set up an organization which will be independent both from higher education, and organization which can have a say in setting up technological process in the country. And our development in general is down to the level of engineers and the level of their knowledge and their ability to implement all this knowledge and implement new technologies in the country. So the quality of HR pool depends on the knowledge of engineers. That's one thing. But in my view, within the framework of the law, which has just been debated, there should be another section concerning our professional education. We want to have a system of uninterrupted education. We want to have a law on uninterrupted professional education. We want to have methodology for this education worked out. But all our attempts face the fact that higher educational institutions are not interested in having this practice in place. But these practices are well established in Germany, in France, and Belarus. There are laws on uninterrupted professional education. And in France, they have a number of associations which are working on methodologies, which are operating scientific centers and think tanks. And our point is this: you need to have a broad education, but you also need to specialize within the framework of getting your education. You need to focus on a specific area. The key point of engineering activity is to go forward. And our objective is to reach the level of the 6th technological paradigm and even 7th. But we have to ensure proper education of our engineers. Education, training, and retraining. When I started my work as an engineer, we didn't have TV sets, we didn't have mobile phones. And had we not tried to educate ourselves, I would probably not be speaking now in front of you now. So the state has to work out the educational methodology, because all these technologies can become out of date very quickly, because you have new technology emerging every 5 or 6 years, like we discussed the day before yesterday, Internet of Things and other technologies. If we focus on building an engineering organization, that's one thing. But if we vest upon these organizations certain rights which relate to education, if we ask ourselves a question, how do we retrain our engineers? How do we improve their qualifications on a regular basis? We have low productivity today in a country because our engineers are not focused on pure engineering tasks. We're not focused on organizing production. We try to put all things into one basket. If we focus now on the end product, then it will finally result in 2- or 3-fold increase in productivity. Because we attended presentation of a locomotive yesterday, and they've got an increase in productivity. So it has to be about an impact on country rate of growth. So it should not be about some professional competences. Today we see that our engineering companies are significantly underdeveloped. We don't have bona fide engineering companies at all, I would say. So we have an issue of training and retraining of our engineers. We have an issue of certifying them as professionals. And our engineers need to have a clear idea about their obligations and responsibilities. They need to know that they've got to transfer this knowledge to their successors. In this case, this law will work properly. Otherwise, there will be a contradiction between the statements of this law and what Russian industrialist unit is doing. Now we have engineering community emerging here, which will be charged with a completely different responsibility. So my view is this: we need to work on focused engineering organization, professional engineering union, which will take care after professional growth of our engineers. Because if we don't have that, then our engineers will be trained locally. So I do believe that this section which is related to training and retraining of engineers has to be stipulated by the law. I see. And our main goal is to ensure country's development. So our country has to advance in its technological level, and this target is not specified in the law. And we have to be self-sufficient. We have to be competitive in the engineering area. So we need to think about how we provide for it in the law. Thank you very much for this proposal. I think that, in a way, this idea has already been included into the law. So the issue of continuous education is touched upon there. Probably you can improve the wording of it, or you can provide the wording like for a separate item. We mentioned international experience, and we know that in the world there are professional engineers in different countries, but these professional issues are dealt with differently. Now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Kakutani Motoyasu, who is the CEO of Yamazaki Mazak.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Please allow me to speak English. I cannot speak Russian language, so sorry. So if you need this equipment to know that my speech. So about an engineer of manufacturing the industry in the Japan. Let me explain that briefly that what we are doing. First of all, I think that the definition for that engineer is different between the Japan and the Russia. We define that what engineering is that not only that graduate at university and that become an engineer automatically. That is different. In case of Japan, the many that student study that technical issue and knowledge at the university. And after graduate university, that most of them that prefer to start work at a manufacturing company. But at that time, maybe that in Russia and Japan are different. That if they start to work for the engineering department, regardless they graduate at university or not, we call them as engineers. It means that even that the high school student study that the technical knowledge at the school, after they graduate school and start to work at manufacturing companies, they become an engineer. So there is no special area that we call the engineer in Japan. That is basically my explanation to you. So even if it is at privatizationers, do you know privatizationers, the beginners, by being that assigned to such type of a job, it is a definition called the engineer. Naturally, the difference appears in the technical skill, but it is the core and the engineer for the beginners in Japan. Beginners and engineer. Of course, basic technical knowledge is necessary to hire at such a type of job in Japan. But for example, college student study that the technical knowledge and we learn and finally that they find a job and such a kind of a manufacturer in Japan, they become an engineer. But this is a very important. Most of the Japanese manufacturers have an educational program for that engineer after they start to work. That is a little bit different, I think. And then that, for example, the Mazak, in case of myself, I also studied. I studied economics and marketing at the university. After graduate, fortunately or unfortunately, I start to work at Mazak after that. The first 6 months after I start to work at Mazak, I have educational training for that technical issue, such as operation of a machine, or how to fix a machine, how to operate a machine, how to make a program. Such a kind of basic knowledge we have following that education plan, and I learned at the company after I graduate and start to work at the Mazak. Then after that, I assigned to the Tokyo office after that. And then at that time, sometimes I went to the customer to fix that machine with the service engineer, or I teach the programming for our customers. So it is that job on training, that during working that to educate such a kind of skill and that knowledge after that start to work. So even now, I can operate the machine itself, and I can make a program for the customer if necessary. That is in my case. Most cases, not only that a student study technical knowledge at the university, maybe some different or study at the university, become engineer. That is I want to say that. So, by the way, the important thing is how to evaluate technical difference between the person who just found a job after graduate university and other that engineer who work as a specialist for many years. That is big difference. How to distinguish that engineer skill in Japan? Let me explain one of example what we are doing in Japan. In Japan, that we have Japanese engineer is that sometimes that authorized skill by examination, national examination, pass that a test. Mean they after they pass that examination, and they become certified technician. We call it's one of kind of a certification. So this kind of a certification can have for anybody, open to anybody, not only that graduate at technical school or not, doesn't matter. Even that the high school student can try to get this kind of certification. Of course, others people, even that the woman, lady, doesn't matter. Anybody have a chance to get this kind of a certificate. So in Japan, and there are 4 types of grade of this certification for technician, and it's called ultimate grade. That's the highest level. The second, first grade, and the second grade, and the third grade certification. So at first, engineer try to have this kind of certification, the third grade. After get this certification, they trying to get a higher level of the certification after that for several years. Then, so this is a very important to distinguish that they feel that they are professional engineer with this certification, and then also that manufacturing company encourage to have this kind of certification, and after get this certification by government, and also a manufacturing company like a Mazak also that pay additional benefit for this kind of engineer. So engineer like to have more money. They work hard, they study more, and they get this kind of certification. This is the case of Japan. And in addition, and this is case just in case in Japan, but I like to introduce other certification for the global kind of global certification, that qualification. It's called maybe that some people already know the SME. And this organization that published in the United States a long time ago, and they expanded this kind of theory and then right now I think that the United States, Canada, and the Asia country, maybe some that the European country also recognize this organization. SME means that the Society of Manufacturing Engineers. That's kind of communication. But this, to become the member of the SME, it's not only the registration. have to pass examination. So only the pass that examination that with high level skill of engineering knowledge become a member of SAB. In case of Mazak and in Japan, we have more than 3,000 employees only in Japan, but more than 450 engineers has this certificate already. So this is one of idea. Maybe it does not fit at Russian's case, but just to please consider one of idea this is very useful for the global purpose. Once I have a certificate in Japan, if I go to work to United States, everybody recognize, oh, you have a specialist, professional. So maybe similar that idea will be very useful in the Russia also, I think. So time is limited. I cannot speak a long time, so thank you very much for my explanation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Matayasu. Следующее слово я...
So the next speaker will be Mr. Sukhov, Director General of Regional Center for Laser Technologies. Good morning, dear colleagues. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. Thank you for the introductory word. I would like to remind you, dear colleagues, that this is for second year we live in this legal framework of industrial policy, because we have a federal law on industrial policy with all the consequences following from it. We are living, so in Sverdlovsk region, they also adopted a law on industrial policy. We talked a lot about engineers, and so perhaps a law on banking and finances can have a point about this, because if you want to get a loan, you need to provide a business plan, and it may have some engineering components. So chief engineer signs off this document normally. So if you need to build a bridge, so in the past, an engineer would stand under the bridge once it's built. A train would go over the bridge, and the person will be there as a proof that this bridge will hold the weight of the train. It's going to be fine. But now it's different. We need to get licenses, different kind of licenses, construction licenses or nuclear activities license, for Rosatom, etc. I know that Gagarin went to space thanks to Mr. Kurilov, and we have many examples of such individual achievements in this field. But last year this book was published by an American author. Is Russia competitive? Of course, we have many innovative ideas, but making those ideas come true, that can be quite problematic. Sometimes Japanese or Chinese colleagues are able to make those ideas realities. So a person may become a millionaire or may live very modestly, having a teaching job. So certificates in Japan, as described now, were just described. A similar system exists in South Korea, from what I know. I think we may have a similar system as well. So individual certificates, assessment system, just like notaries, they pass some tests to be able to operate as notaries. So if engineers pass similar tests, and when you submit a business plan to a bank, it's signed by a CEO and should be signed by a certified engineer. So in our universities, those who are involved in educational processes and those who graduate, and those we have bachelors, those who get 4 years of education, but engineers need to get at least 5 years of education. So the status of an engineer should be higher than the status just of a regular bachelor. So engineers develop new products. So thank you very much for the fact that the Union of Industrialist Entrepreneurs organized this platform to discuss these issues. We invited our Japanese partner. So I would like to thank the organizers for that as well. We cooperate with this company. They have an annual event which is called Touch the Future. So in that way, they try to forecast things they may want to create in 20 or 30 years. That's very interesting. What is going on here is something somewhat similar, because the law will be adopted maybe 2 or 3 years down the road, but now we are working on it, we're discussing it, so we're discussing future. Of course, it may be amended multiple times. So this idea of having a register of certified engineers is a good one. It's good for banking, for getting a bank loan, and also we have government programs. So we need expert reviews are done, so that can be used for those purposes as well. So that should elevate the status of an engineer, and that should provide necessary funding for engineering activities. And so this dilution of the status of an engineer. In Yekaterinburg, they used to have 16 institutions of higher education, and now there are 50 of them. Some are state-owned, others are private, but the quality of education is in question. If you say that you have an engineering degree, that means the government certifies that you are able to make those calculations and you're able to be involved in those professional activities. It should be transparent and understandable for everyone. Thank you for your attention. Thank you. Well, the next speaker is Mr. Orlov, who is the head of TRT Trans, which is an engineering center of Transmech Holding and Alstom, which is railroad transport. I represent a joint venture company. It's an engineering company. We work with Alstom. We developed locomotives from 2008 at the first stage. That was a joint work of Russian and French specialists. We used experience of developing locomotives of Alstom and our Russian experience as well. So several projects were implemented, for Russian railways. So that was just a little small bit about myself, but now I would like to discuss these problems. So this is the first time I am at such a forum. So I've worked as an engineer for 30 years, or even more. I've been developing locomotives for Russian railways mostly, but not only. We also worked for other countries, for China, for Finland. And so the process of creating a locomotive, developing a locomotive is similar. For me, it's a parallel to a childbirth. You have its conception, that it sees the world, then it learns to walk, and then goes to school, and then once it gets to that level, you start serial production, you start generating profit. So our equipment our machinery is quite complicated, and payback period is quite long. It's 10 to 12 years, at least that. So our machine building business is not very attractive for investments, perhaps. Of course, there are some spheres where payback period is much shorter. So you invest today and reap benefits tomorrow. For us, it's a long-term business. It may not be just as profitable, and also products. We depend on other industries like electronics. So in Russia, we have difficulties with electronics, for instance. If you want to produce an innovative product, piece of machinery, so we need to use imported components. So in new locomotives, state-of-art locomotive has 60 to 70% of imported components. So we have to pay international partners. We help them develop in a way. So not Russian companies, but foreign companies. So 10 to 12 years in transport machine building, as I said. But electronics, if you want to state-of-art transistor, which is a science-intensive product. So in my understanding, without government regulation, without major investments on the part of government, it's impossible to develop those devices. So the role of an engineer is to define strategic areas so those science-intensive areas, we need to develop those areas and those competencies here in this country. So that's the first thing. Of course, it's a difficult objective to attain. Another important and interesting aspect, of course, we need to have a legal framework to regulate engineering activities, because how do you produce those sophisticated pieces of machinery? Technical regulation is part of it. And also, in my experience, our locomotives should be certified for safety. So that's about 30% to 40% of the investments in developing and creating. Can you imagine those colossal amounts of money just to get the safety certificate? And an engineer develops and invents something that puts into production. That's their idea, but who provides that certificate? So it's an organization which should be more competent than the engineer who invented that thing. But it's an absurd situation. Why is it impossible? Why can't you trust the engineer? So why can't they just sign off and guarantee that this item is safe? It will be operating safely. So why do we need to pay so much for that safety certificate? And this is a difficult business just as it is. So I wanted for those things to be covered in new law as well. Please. Thank you for that, Your Excellency. Mr. Serebryny, Deputy Director of NAMI. Good morning, colleagues. So in my presentation, I would like to share briefly on some aspects of developing engineering in the prism of prospects of our machine building. Just as we said that we are shifting to the sixth technological paradigm, and our main problem in machine building is a very low labor productivity. Currently, it's maybe we're 10 times. It's 1/10 of best practices in the world. So if you look at the slide, we import industrial robots for our industrial companies per year. So we buy 500 robots. In In China, they buy 60,000 robots per year. So you can compare the scales in Japan, in South Korea, in Germany, in the States. Over 20,000 robots per year are purchased. So you can compare those numbers and see the difference. So without shifting to new understanding, we need to understand that automation of production processes is a must. So without it, it's impossible to advance. So even if we upgrade our production facilities, if we buy state-of-the-art manufacturing tools, machine tools from Japan, let's say, of course, it's a better situation, but we have bottlenecks. There's a bottleneck before this machine tool and after that machine tool, so it cannot function properly as a result. It doesn't really change the whole situation in the industrial company.
So the productivity does not change as the result, does not change a great deal. So we have to change our vision at how our industry has to be developed. So we should not make some local and focused changes, some technological changes. No, we've got to rethink our entire manufacturing system. And we've got to think in the context of more automation. We need to reduce the role of a human being. We need to introduce ERP, PDM, MRP systems at our manufacturing plants, because without that, I think, unfortunately, in near future, the gap between us and the technological leaders will only increase, because currently we are seen as a source of cheap labor, and actually that's no longer true, because we have a deindustrialization process in place, and this process is championed by our competitors. So we see more and more manufacturing jobs getting back to Germany and United States. But all this manufacturing is a lot more automated. The processes are automated. Flexible manufacturing systems are adopted. There is no manual labor. And here on this slide, you can see the unfortunate position of Russia among the tech leaders. The share of automated manufacturing processes is extremely low. So we need to dramatically rethink our approach, and we've got to do something to change the situation for the better. So So we have to think about changing mentality of our engineers, because we've got to transfer from this. We've got to make a shift from the paradigm of making focused changes to the paradigm of adopting a holistic approach to better automation, to implementation of advanced tools, and they are available in the market at the moment. So that will help, I think, to reverse the trend, because currently we are more engaged in firefighting rather than taking a higher look at it and thinking what we can do to generally improve this. And I've got to make an example. In 1986, we had some integral programs focused on automating our manufacturing and adopting flexible systems. For now, we see our manufacturing industry going back. So I think what we should do is to create as much stimulus for our manufacturing companies to automate their industries more and more. So that we've got to make sure that we get upgraded to the level of 6 technological paradigm. And this automation of manufacturing has to be approached in a holistic perspective. That will ensure competitiveness of our tech companies. I don't know how do we provide legal framework for this, but by all means, this is something what we have to do. We have to audit all our upgrades projects. We have to audit all our upgrade projects in the military industrial area, and we need to have more automation in our industry. Because if we fail to do this, then in 2020, all the key items from our military industrial program will be completed, and the majority of our industrial capacity and majority of our manufacturing companies will find itself in a quite challenging condition, simply because there will be no way for them to compete with Western companies, Western partners. That's it from my side, and thank you very much for your attention. Thank you. Thank you. And the final presentation for today, it's a representative from the Urals Federal University, Oleg Rabrik. Good afternoon. Oh, good morning, dear colleagues. I don't have a presentation. So I think it is the right thing that we need to have a legal framework, a law on engineering activity and a law on engineers. We need to take a holistic approach to this, because even today's discussion showed that unless we resolve the issue with education, we'll make no advancement in the engineering area. So two statements about the current state of things in education. The first statement relates to an issue which has already been mentioned here, Bolognian approach. There is no issue, there is no difficulty with Bolognian approach, but we've got to slightly change our system. Now we have bachelor's degree and master's degree, but enough lamenting about the situation. We've got to start working. Now we have a document which specifies qualification levels and specifies requirements to the level of knowledge of masters and bachelors. These requirements are different. Bachelor is a completely different specialist. We probably are not ready for this idea, and the process is going really, really slowly. It is wrong to regard a bachelor as normal graduate. The educational program has to be different. Educational program should be tailored to the requirements. And here I would refer you to national standards which specify requirements to bachelors. And we need to take into account requirements for masters too, because you will not find these requirements, but it is the graduates from with the master's degree should take the place vacated by engineers. And these are completely different educational program. In our cases, master degree was a preparation for postgraduate study. Now, master degree should be acquired based on a real-life project, and the education has to be combined with on-job training in manufacturing somewhere. I would like to refer you to the previous version of our law on education, which stipulated that the concept of qualification or level of skills. And we had the mention of this in diplomas. Now there is no concept of level of skills. There is only qualification level. And it is wrong to apply the same concept to the master's degree and bachelor's degree, because we are providing them with a level of skills, and qualification level has to be assigned to them by the employer. There has to be a professional qualification organization. There has to be professional appraisal of engineers. So you pass your appraisal, and it becomes clear whether you are an engineer or you're a technician or you are a highly skilled worker. So you've got to prove your level. You've got to prove your qualification. You need to prove that you are in line with your employer's requirements. That's it, I think. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think we have slightly fallen behind our schedule, but nevertheless, I promised you an opportunity to ask a question. If you have a question, 30 seconds for a question and 1 minute for an answer. Who would you like to ask your question to? Good morning. My question is to those who drafted the law on engineering activity. Just the previous speaker mentioned the qualification and appraisal system for engineers based on industry type. Qualification is one of the points specified in the law. And qualification is seen as an entry into the professional activity. Are you making any distinction between qualification and, let's say, level of skills? If yes, then do you think that this double system can in effect be a barrier for young people who would like to become engineers? Do you think they can get demotivated because of that? Okay, Igor, please. Just very brief answer. Thank you very much for the question. But we are not an entrance into a world of engineering. An entrance into the world of engineering is provided by the state certifications committee. So you become an engineer, you start advancing in your career. But if you're a low-level engineer, you're not signing project documentations or you're not taking key decisions, whilst you need to be trained on your job. And at a certain point in time, when you get to a certain level, then more opportunities get opened up for you. And then you need to think whether you want to advance any further, because that would mean more opportunities and more responsibility. And you have to think for yourself whether you are up to these requirements. It's like, if you want a metaphor, it's like a different type of the driving license. Good morning. My name is Ovchinnikov Stas, and I graduated from the Urals Technological University. I would like to work as an engineer, and I would like to get an engineer's degree in Japan. But it is quite difficult to go to Japan and study there. Are there any educational programs in place which are supported by the state, within the framework of which program I can go to Japan and study there? I will answer this question. Current draft of the law does not provide for such an opportunity. If you're working for a corporation which is focused on training their people, then this corporation can send you to Japan, to US, to Mars, you name it. If the company is not ready to pay for this, then the state can provide some grants, some funding for this, but that funding is very much limited. The law that we mentioned here, the law in engineering, does not specify these parameters. However, there are international institutions which can help people like you. A question to our Japanese colleague. It is a question about finance. So when we advance in our careers, when engineer goes one level up this ladder, does he have to pay, or does that mean extra cost for his company? You have to pay a fee on an annual basis. Yes, if you become the part of the engineering association, then there is a fee. You have to undergo through the postgraduate training in a certain amount of hours every year, and we have not decided on the amount of hours yet. And we think that this fee will be deducted from your tax base. Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions? I think that the first two speakers had the wrong set of ideas. It is about exporting products. Let's have product first to export. Let's not think about export first. Let's get a product which we can sell. Because if we adopt your approach, we will have to take a step back and we'll find ourselves in the beginning of the 20th century. Now we have to create environment for engineers so that the companies will start to compete to get best engineers. Now our engineers are working as taxi drivers because we have too many engineers. We have too many engineers, too many holders of engineering diploma. Well, let's not squabble now. If you have a question, you ask the question, you can take your seat, and I will try to answer this. I don't think that we should make a distinction between these processes. So, like, let's first set up our production and manufacturing internally, then let's think about export. Because today, there are areas where we are quite competitive. So you ask me a question, give me an opportunity to answer it. I haven't answered it yet. So in some areas, our engineers and engineering ideas are very much competitive. So we need to support them from legally, and we need to support them from the state perspective. And whether we have a lot of engineers or not enough engineers at the moment, we're not trying to assess that. There is no evaluation. We are talking about certifying them and classifying all our engineering pool and breaking it up by the level of competence. This will help us to find more competent people who are ready to take on more responsibility and who are ready to enjoy other benefits and preferences. So we need to, from this engineering pool, we need to find those people who are capable of having their own engineering activity. This is what the law is focused on. At the moment, we are not saying that we need to cut the number of people with master's and bachelor's engineering degrees. So we're not saying that. We're not saying that we should artificially create the shortage of engineers and inspire competition. And we're not talking about education. We're talking about engineering activity and engineers who have already graduated from an educational institution. That's the point of this law. Well, the colleagues wants to see engineering business sprawling here. We don't have enough people who are passionate about this. You can come to me offline, we will discuss that. We're exporting brains, and we are exporting technologies, and we are importing like debts. And you're actually suggesting something along the same line. So let's find out who the best engineer is, and let's send them abroad. Let's have a more detailed conversation. Once we go into the details of our proposal, you will see that that's exactly what you want, actually. Your colleagues, they had very good points, and you, in the shoes of lawmakers, have very vague ideas. Based on what was said by the industry representatives, I got that they support ideas from that law. They were mentioning certain proposals focused on amending the document, and we have to review those proposals and see whether they are in line with the general concept. But based on what was said by the speakers today, I see no contradiction between what they say and what the law states. I haven't seen a single contradiction. So let's not artificially blow this into the size of a problem. We have enough issues, natural issues, which we have to deal with. But since there is no more questions, let me wrap up our discussion. Once again, my impression is that the general idea of this law is supported and accepted by the industry. some amendments has to be reviewed by the lawmakers. Now, some tactical issues related to passing this law. The situation is quite challenging, I would say, and we have three categories of issues. The first category of issues, mentality of engineers. A lot of engineers do not accept this law at all because they see this law is affecting, as interfering actually, in their interests. Because such kind of introducing this qualification will make let one group of engineers advance further in the business, and will set back those people who do not have enough engineering skills. They will be in a challenging situation, I would say. Let's say they do not feel themselves as self-sufficient engineers. And tomorrow, when they will be affected by the law, they will not be up to the mark in terms of qualification. So it will be a challenge for them. Another issue is the fact that there is no alignment between understanding of engineering concept by different departments and different industries. We have a lot of engineers, smelting engineer, economist engineer, all sorts of engineers. And one of our speakers mentioned today that we don't think that this law can work without involvement of federal executive bodies. Today, so it has to be aligned with what federal executive bodies are doing. So just based on deputy initiatives, that will be impossible to do. However, we are in an anecdotal situation because potentially there is a Ministry of Industry on one hand, Ministry of Construction on the other hand, Ministry of Economy, because they would say we have economic engineers, and all these ministries in a way have right to be supervisors of this project. We've got an answer from the Minister of Industry, so they support our ideas. However, they make a reservation. They say the final position of our ministry will be outlined after this issue is considered by higher governmental bodies. So at the moment, this is an interdepartmental issue, and the final decision will be made on the level of vice premiers. Vice prime ministers. So we need to take several months to work to shape this document so that it is ready for being reviewed by the vice prime minister and by presidential advisors. And these people can help to outline position of the presidential administration.
So another point that we should take into consideration, basically it's the level of readiness for autonomous creative activities. Historically, we have professions for which transition to applying this law will be easy for them. As an example, architectural activities, it's also engineering of sorts. So architecturals are better trained to transition to this, to apply innovations compared to mechanical engineers who traditionally worked in large groups, who traditionally had a difficult time implementing. So their ideas in small companies to get to the final product stage, to make sure their engineering ideas become reality. So their products had to be implemented not in General Motors, but a small company. So the degree of readiness of different categories of engineers for this law is different. So that can be a serious barrier, or perhaps we should have a clear, well-formulated transitional period. So this is something to be discussed once we contact the I've been very frank with you. I've described our tactical problems to make this draft law a full-fledged document and law. I think all the proposals voiced here can be further discussed with our working group. We can do this additionally. They're constructive in nature, and they should be taken into account. And I think that now Igor Viktorovich should provide contact info so that additional proposals could be shared with the working group in the next 2 months, because we work on this actively to promote this draft law. From September, we'll be actively promoting it. So at the next session of the working group, we'll be able to review those proposals, and if needed, we can take them into consideration. So colleagues, I would please do not throw away those plastic bags, but look at the front face of the plastic bag. So our websites and email address are there. So you see the address, so you can send your proposals to that email address. So they'll be reviewed, they'll be taken into consideration. A website has a forum. We have a group of the National Chamber of Engineers. We have a group on Facebook, so this is quite popular. And this speech by my colleague is important. So it's not just an emotional speech, but there should be a continuation to this. So let's work on this together. We don't have people who are active on their own, so that's one of the key problems in engineering activities. You cannot do it on your own. I have a book on a country of frightened engineers. For a century, engineers were kept in fear. So now we need to put a stop to this. We need to change the situation. If you're interested, I can sign this book for you. This is it. Colleagues, thank you very much for your participation.
Более серьезно подчеркнуть, что этот закон направлен на повышение квалификации.
После железная дорога, подойдите, пожалуйста, сюда.
Слушай, ты сейчас поехал домой?
Нет.
Скажите, вот мы пытаемся. Вы можете на Озоне, понимаешь, с идеей, что вы все, они там сделают все, что это добьются. Потому что они опять боятся, что опять вставят вузовскую программу квалификацию инженера. Вот они не хотят этого. А здесь задача другая. Здесь надо задача, я ее понял по-другому. Здесь надо получить право подписи. Если ты инженер, и сертифицировать.
Где можно
проект, если ты подписал, боком помню.
У вас лично?
Да. На Озоне там какие-то ужасные там цифры заводят. Я не знаю. Мы предлагаем 500 рублей.
Предлагаем 500 рублей.
Да. Вот там, подходите.
Сборки автомата приступить. Сборки автомата приступить.
Is the
Дорогие друзья, давайте начинать.
Dear friends, we should start. As we know from practice, people will be coming, but we don't need to wait for them. So the title of this roundtable, if you read it, is difficult to grasp. So in the beginning, there was yesterday we had a roundtable on industrial robotics, and today we wanted to talk about service robotics. We want to talk about various services and professional services in this area, but the ideologist of this roundtable is Albert Efimov of Robotics Center in Skolkovo, and quite justly he said that these differences are becoming fuzzy. Actually, fuzzier and fuzzier. Actions of every robot, you don't know what is more important, software or mechanics. So robots come in such great varieties, they work in such different spheres that old classification, it does exist, of course, still today, and we still use it. Industrial robotics, service robotics, intra-industrial robotics, etc. But it doesn't reflect the actual state of affairs, like the structure of government bodies doesn't have to reflect the structure of economy. We have the Ministry of Economics, but we don't have the Ministry of the Internet. So there's no... Robotics is a very actively used area, but there's no Ministry of Robotics. So even though in some countries they may have it. So another interesting issue that we discuss a lot with companies is threats or opportunities for when robots replace people. Some are afraid of that. Some really work on that to make it a reality. And between those two poles are companies and government bodies. And a head of a large company told me, we want to put robots in our company, but we'll have to fire thousands of people, so authorities would not let it happen. The governor will put pressure on us, etc. So that's an interesting situation. Statistically, over 20 years, we have statistics on implementation of robotics over the last 20 years, and we have 4 types of activities: manual, routine labor, or manual cognitive, intellectual routine activities, bureaucratic activities, office activities, or intellectual cognitive activities, creative activities. So those are clearly delineated activities. Over the last 10 years, from the 2000s, they diverge. So they automated first manual routine activities. From the 1990s, they focused more on intellectual routine activities as well. So they stopped their growth as automation investments and do not improve labor productivity anymore. So those are areas so robots come into those areas, either software robots or mechanical robots. But intellectual, cognitive areas where humans are needed, where creative potential of human being, of human brain, cannot be replaced with a robot. So we should not be afraid of it. So people will be dealing more and more with areas where they can be humans and use their human capacities. If it can be described with an algorithm, if it's a routine activity, whether it's paperwork or dealing with mechanical details, robots and machines will come into those areas sooner or later. There are helpers, there are partners, because we talk more and more about artificial intelligence. So hopefully today we'll be talking about different types of use for robots. So Robotics Center at Skolkovo has a very broad palette. And our speakers also represent different areas. They make their own contribution, and hopefully we will have a very informative and interesting conversation on this. So I'll give the floor to Albert. Thank you very much. Greetings to you all. I think we should not be afraid of robots, that they will take over, and it's like Elon Musk said, we should not be afraid of Mars getting overpopulated, but we should be ready for it in any case. So I should be prepared as well. So we have technicians here, we don't have robots, so it's human beings that will start my presentation. So let me begin. Convergence of robotics is a very interesting topic. So Vitaly covered a lot of ground. I will try to focus more specifically on this aspect. I think most of us here have some idea of our center, so it doesn't need any introductions. The only thing that I would like to mention about my place of work is that dreamers should be together. So Skolkovo is a town, and it covers all the other institutions, developmental institutions. We're a town, we are a place where we have people, and we have a place where there are robots. So dreamers should live together. All the best things in life come when people move. So when things move, when people move. When Peter I founded St. Petersburg, so Europeization of Russia got started, and people moved. And people moved to Skolkovo. That's where intellectual elites get together. So after yesterday's meeting, we met in a bar. We had a very lively discussion. So Skolkovo, we have 1,500 participants. We have 80 billion in revenues. So we're not trying to impress people just with our words and gestures. We have operating companies. 16% of them have sales, 25% of them have international sales. So investments are 6.14 billion rubles, and we have 18,000 employees, and those are not some bureaucratic positions, but those are mostly engineers. So 18,000 people who know how to do their work, they're not afraid of it. There are 5 areas I focus on. It's important to understand in the context of what we're doing. We believe that innovations in robotics are impossible in these areas. If you tell me that there's some other areas, okay, you need to convince me of that. So the first one, understanding of robots in navigational, it's like unmanned vehicles, unmanned transport, that's one area. Interaction between robots and humans. Currently, Honda has Azimuth, so a robot that can play soccer, and they can bring some tea for you. So, but it's basically got started as a doll from Kabuki theater, Japanese traditional theater. So how do you train a robot to change its operations without bringing a group of Japanese or Korean programmers? I think it's a doable task. You can resolve it. It's possible to do it. And then augmented systems. It's like not to replace humans, but to expand our capacities. Medical robots. It's a capital-intensive area. We need to do a lot of testing. Some people are afraid of robots altogether, but there are those who are not afraid of them. So they want to create an equivalent of Da Vinci, which is a surgical robot. And then the last one is neural networks. You may have heard of it, but it's about artificial intelligence. In the next 10 to 15 years, it will be very important. If your robots do not have deep learning, no neural network, you are missing something important here, because artificial intelligence systems will be using those neural networks. So when I talk about examples, when I give examples of our projects. And so there are several videos here. I'm pretty sure that you may have seen it, but our flagship project in Skolkovo, in few hours in Moscow, a press conference will stop at the boiling point. So some changes in this project will be announced. So large-scale sales will start. So it's not clinical tests. It's not at that stage. It will go for sales. The cost is 1.5 million rubles. So it's only 1/3 of its foreign equivalents, but it helps you start walking again. It's Russian in development. It's state of the art. It's even better than its foreign equivalents. This is my favorite video. It's I don't think you can find it on the internet, but still, I oftentimes it's unmanned vehicles. It's one of our most important areas for us. Different technologies can be used. So these are airborne paratroopers from Ryazan. So there's an American equivalent of that developed by Lockheed Martin. So it's somewhat similar, but it was all manufactured in Russia, every piece of it. So when we tell the military people about our software, and when we demonstrate that, they make a face like that and they go like, uh-huh. So when we demonstrated this one, the same software says, how can we get it? We want it. So that was a different response. So that's to illustrate, you need to demonstrate the technology, so how it really works, otherwise there'll be no positive response to it. So submersible robots, it's a very small submersible underwater robot. It's a global leader because it's a very small robot. It's a very expensive robot, but they're able to already sell dozens of these robots per year. So this is a service robots. So their number in Russia exceeds the number of industrial robots. So this is what we're talking about. So here's another project. I'm very proud of it. Many may say it's not really innovative. So like those prosthetics, we've already seen it, but our colleagues developed them. Back in the 1950s, in the Russian Academy of Sciences, they already worked on those. But we also have a startup based in Skolkovo on motorics. So they're doing a great job there. So to help children how to move their hand. And all my colleagues, when they see this, when they see what's going on, you bring tears to your eyes when you see this. Yesterday, we missed an important point when we talked about economy. Economics, of course, is a major factor in robotics. So when you do calculations for any business case, so you take into consideration these factors. Productivity improvement. Robot is like a machine tool, and amortization should be taken into account, so the cost should factor that in. Another tool, whether it helps a human being or replaces a human being, so we accelerate production cycle. Another important trend, China is not attractive anymore for placing production. Of course, you can visit Chinese booths there. A lot of production taking place in China, but average salary in China is now higher than average salary in Russia. And it's true. It's not a fake. It's a true piece of information. That middle class in China is larger than middle class in Russia. It's a fact. If you'll go to Beijing, you'll see there are middle class people, lots of them. 5 years ago, they were not there. But nonetheless, China is not super attractive anymore for production sites. So so in New York Times they wrote about robotization of China. So in one province they asked all the workers to come, and they tell them robots will be put in play in your place, and you can leave. You're free to go. And they say, where will we go? Wherever you want to go. So in Europe, Philips, when they produce the same products, they have only 1/10 of the workforce. Aging population is another factor. So the average age of a German worker who works for BMW is 50 years. So they're ready to enter retirement. So, and they're highly qualified. So they need to be helped. Robots will be needed to help them. I think the Japanese situation doesn't need any comment. So TV talks a lot about it. So the number of people on the planet who are over 60 of age and who are under 5, it's the same number of people. Safety is the last point. So to remove human beings from hazardous environments, etc., where it's risky. So what robots do in Japan? They play soccer, they play flutes, they read poetry, they bring your tea to you. So when Fukushima happened, what they did, they kept playing their flutes and bringing teas. That's true, that's what was happening. Because robotics in Japan is a major industry, but in Fukushima, when the disaster happened, American robots were used. So American robots really worked, and they demonstrate their advantages, but Japanese robots were not able to they weren't really helpful in that situation. So education and medicine are two areas where prices are growing. Other prices are declining. Cambrian moment in modern robotics. So do you know Cambodian explosion from the evolution theory? Cambrian revolution in evolution biology 400 million years ago. That's when a large variety of biodiversity basically happened there. So the number of species multiplied by dozens, so eyes were developed. They were able to see for the first time. They started to see, okay, that's a female, that's a male. Eyes, they were able to see the food available to them. So that's what happens to robotics, to robots these days. Right now, 5 years ago, robots were like you were not able to talk about robots. People were not interested. But then things really changed. We see exponential growth, Moore's law, computational powers. Everybody heard about that. But with application to robotics, we know that iPhone processing capacity is now comparable to computers from 10 years ago. So we know about that. Then life cycle acceleration into developing new products. So that means that robots can be made much faster and much cheaper compared to what we had 5 years ago. So that's an important factor. So you can become part of the game much sooner. Students, graduates of universities. So now the cost of bringing people together is much lower. So you can have a startup much sooner.
Enhancing capacity of power batteries. Do you know the type of these batteries? These are Panasonic batteries. Currently, these are the most efficient batteries available in the market. They're very high, so emergence of high-capacity accumulators is very important. But however, they are still not as efficient as combustible engine for example. So, electronics. Exponential growth of capacity, again, network capacity. Long-term evolution networks are available almost everywhere now. They work really well. Now we are talking 5G, and we are talking about unmanned vehicles, and unmanned vehicles, both aerial vehicles and terrestrial vehicles, will be unthinkable without proper 5G connection. And now we have 2 mobile devices per person in the world. Several years after, there will be 3 or 4 per one human being. And I think those of you who are surfing through Facebook and not listening to me, those of you at least have up to 2 gadgets per person. Data storage and the cost of data storage. We all remember that first experiments were about storing several kilobytes of data. It was just mere 3 decades ago. So what are the issues which are currently faced by robotics? All present-day issues have been sorted out, so there is not a lot left. So our interrelation with our startups is about actually working with those issues which have been dealt with. But there are 2 things left. It's perception of the world by the robots. So how do they act in this life? How do they move? How do they comprehend what a human being says? We have manipulators, and various kinds of manipulators are presented here by different vendors. Their cost is very seldom below $10,000, which is quite complicated. So how do we make sure that a robotic hand costs just $500, which has the same flexibility as the human hand? So this is the main issue. So how do we get from point A to point B? How does the robot do this? That issue has already been dealt with or sorted out. So this is not interesting any longer. We need to think about what the robot does or should do once he gets from A to B. Artificial intelligence. Well, you can get this chart from the internet. And that's a beautiful chart, which shows that our understanding of artificial intellect is between an ant and a bird. So we think that we have state-of-the-art robots, and these robots possess artificial intelligence. But actually, nobody needs that grade of artificial intelligence. It has not been born yet. It has yet to go a very long way to approach even to the most dumb person. Well, here is the comparison which we made for one of the conference on military robotics, for example. A guy on the left is putting together a Kalashnikov machine gun. So we can do that with our eyes closed. I mean, at least those who studied in the USSR times. But nevertheless, and on the right, there is a Japanese robot who is playing a game, and that robot who is playing a game like stone or scissors, and this robot is winning against the human being. So this is the maximum what a robot can do at the moment. So I'm saying this just to illustrate my point. We should not be concerned about robots conquering our planet. They will not do this, since they simply lack capacity for now. High potential areas. We'll talk about that slightly later. And cloud computing. Interaction between a robot and the cloud creates immense opportunities for startups, because that provides huge data storage opportunities for robots. And one of our speakers will be talking about that in detail. Collaboration opportunities. Simulation of experience by means of robots. Studying human experience. Now the world is transferring to the software-defined business model. That's what we call it. So how did this happen? We create a technology. It is being implemented in manufacturing. It is being implemented and then used. This is a traditional model. And now we are talking about software-defined business model. All the bits of this system are currently comprised by one platform. Not only we have a network of distributors, but all bits of our business processes, all stages of our value chain creation are comprised by one platform. Probably at the current stage, it is not so easy to see this, but if you take a look at the premium segment cars, you will notice. Industry 4.0, it was vastly mentioned at this conference, and if we read through the documents defining the glossary of this Industry 4.0 and the resulting document which was released in March 2016, then you will see that industrial internet and Industry 4.0 are synonyms, at least in the European understanding of this word. Digital technologies convert a manufactured product into a hybrid between a service and a product, and that's where convergence is. So there is no difference between a product and a service. I'll give you an example. Before, manufacturing plants used to make a turbine. Now these turbines are fitted with sensors. Why customers want to pay for idle time for the turbine? There is no point. And the manufacturer understands that they can charge the customer for the use of the turbine rather than for the turbine as a product. And we will be transferring more and more to this model. So here is this is a convergence between manufacturing and service, and convergence between manufacturing robotics and service robotics. So these functions will merge, and robotics of the future will be more about intellectual robots interacting with each other autonomously. There will be human-less operations and Internet of Things. These are components of the same process. A man and a machine is better than a man without a machine altogether. MIT has run an experiment, so they had some scenarios illustrating this interrelation, and their general conclusion is this: flexible production unit, or flexible production unit gives you 80% more capacity provided your interaction between the man and machine is properly structured. So we have mass scale production, we have machine production, and we have hybrid production or convergence type production, and it is only about collaboration and interaction between a man and machine. Robotics are taking the place of the human beings, but Vitaly has pointed that out. I don't think we should be concerned about that, but we are professional in this area, and we should work on those robots who assist human beings. And this is one of the dichotomies of Industry 4.0. So one part of this concept is distributed intellect, cloud computing. So artificial intelligence, which is AI, and intelligent augmentation, IA. If you ask me about position of Skolkovo robotics is where it is mostly in the area of IA. I have some forecasts regarding what robotics currently means for the entire world, but to cut the long story short, please take my word for it. Robotics will be a huge business in pretty close future. This is assessment of McKinsey. They try to assess the impact of robotics on the world economy, which will be over $5.5 trillion in 10 years from now. Service robotics and manufacturing robotics. Service robotics is growing exponentially. It sees explosive growth. Manufacturing robotics is growing in line with a linear mode. You can refer to the internet for the growth figures, but take a look here. Mobile robotics is growing. Logistics robotics sector is also growing. Have you seen Cookie Booth on the way here? Oh, you're from Cookie yourself, so you must have seen it. There is a mobile platform with a manipulator. Is it about service or is it about manufacturing? A mobile robotics platform in line with the existing classification, is a service robot. But the mobile platform with a manipulator, is it a service robot or a manufacturing robot? So 2016 has already become the year of robotics. And we have taken actually a look at the grill robot which is grill robot. They're selling an immense amount of those grill robots, but it's pretty simple. There is no artificial intelligence. And you will not be buying a grill robot for yourself. That's insane. You're buying it as a present, right? You're buying it as a present to your uncle, for example, but you're not operating it yourself. So this is an anecdotal situation about the service robotics of the present day. Here on the chart you can see an American UAV. The cost of it is $2 million. These are two Da Vinci robots, each of which costs $1 million. So the most marginal, the most yielding area of robotics is medical robotics at the moment. We can keep saying that industrial robotics is taking the first place, but medical robotics is the most profitable sector. Where is Russia's position in here? Russia's position is quite mediocre, but that reflects our industrial slump, which happened after the crash of the Soviet Union. But the upside of this is we are in a very good situation as far as service robotics is concerned. We have some positive things, also some advantages. So, as MBA graduates say that, let's make a SWOT analysis. Russia has a big number of talented engineers. Nobody will argue with that. We are capable of resolving complex matters. That's true. Positive attitude to robots. It was not us who invented a Terminator. It was them who invented a Terminator, and we invented positive robots. Technocratically minded population. I think we have the biggest share of people in probably Europe who currently own smartphones and is penetrated with internet. So opportunities, vast territory, great opportunity for the use of unmanned vehicles. Another point, software is the world. This is the statement made by Mr. Anderson, who has created the Netscape. And if you read through his essay, you will see that any sort of engineering difficulty can be modeled at some point in time by a software. 25% of our 25% of our GDP is attributed to retail business. Somebody says that that's bad. I would say that's an opportunity. That creates immense opportunities for robotics, for automation, from the point of view of automation. Depreciation of ruble. Our startups have become a lot more affordable, so investors can invest. Weaknesses, low level of trust. Nobody trusts anyone. And in terms of the number of robotics technicians, we are taking the first place in the world because we have very many of them, but they're not trained enough. I have attended a tech forum in Nizhny Novgorod, and it was about unmanned vehicles, and I asked a question to the audience: who can start a neuron network? And nobody could tell me how to do that. I was shocked. So our entrepreneurship culture is quite low. People want to get money from the state, but they are unwilling to do anything. That's a serious issue. They are not team players because everyone is a star. Customs. We need to deal with it somehow because it is impossible to export anything, especially export something which includes hardware plus software. That's a problem. Migration. If you drive migrants out of the country, that will create a huge demand for robotics. Threats. That's pretty evident. currently work on a presentation about Skolkovo, and in the West they already work on a prototype. In other words, they work a lot faster. I asked my colleagues from those startups who were funded by DARPA, and I asked them a question. So you got $2 million from DARPA. How did you spend it? I said, we don't know. We just got the money from DARPA, and then we bought whatever we wanted. So they didn't account for this money, and we have to provide a whole heap of accounting reports. And also, Russian big business is quite opportunistic. You can keep talking about SMEs and orders from SMEs, but once you start talking tenders, then as an SME you need to provide a 5-year reference, and that's the end of story, because a new company does not have references. So we'll skip this slide. Co-robots. Just a couple of words about them, because I think there are people in the audience who are probably not aware of that. Who knows what a co-robot is? Okay, just a couple of words about that to outline this issue for you. I have attended Sunka forum. Sunka is a big German company. It's not about robots. It is a family business which owns manufacturing platform which products are very much needed for robotics, like manipulators, grips. Sumka owners want to have the 10-year vision ahead, and they get together world experts in robotics, and somehow they became interested in Russian robotics also. But that year, the forum was entirely about service robotics, and 30% of reports and presentations were solely devoted to co-robots. Robots are kept in cages, and we saw integrators who operated robots not abiding by the safety standards, but those robots who operate together with human beings, they were caged so that they don't injure a human. Now we have pictures from MRK Systems, who is cookie integrator, and human beings in this case can use a robot as an exoskeleton. And there are two approaches to developing co-robots. So we take an existing manipulator or mechanical arm. Let's say, had this been a real mechanical arm, that would be a fatality. But take a look. This is the same cookie mechanical arm, and this arm is fitted with different sensors, defining its position. Another approach is building a co-robot from scratch. This is being done by an American company, and you can take a look at how these robots work in Moscow. I also talked to an MIT graduate, one of the founder of the iRobot program, and the second most widespread language in their company is Russian. The third one is Chinese. Another thing is Universal Robots, which is working on a range of mechanical arms with 3, 5, and 10 kilo capacity. Recently, it was sold to an American company for $300 million. 5 years ago, the company was not there. It's a Danish startup, and now it is sold for 300 rubles. Co-robotic segment. This segment is bound to grow threefold as compared to general growth rate in industry.
It's an industrial robot because it's used in the industry, but it's a service robot because it provides a service to a human being. So comparison of labor costs in Germany, in Eastern Europe, in China, and here. So I spoke about trends, about Fukushima, exoskeletons. Just a few words, because I'm about to be done. Because the round table is almost over. Okay, just a few words about exoskeletons. Their military use, their industrial use, their personal use. So industrial use is the most interesting. Recently, in the nuclear cluster of Skolkovo, the first exoskeleton developed in Russia was presented. So this is how exoskeletons work in the upper part of the body. You can see this drummer. It's a well-known drummer. And you can see that in the bottom, yeah, it got launched. It has 4 hands. So there's a panel there in the back. There's 4 hands. So he gets some help, and they understand what the human being is doing. So that's a very serious, a very much needed thing. So exoskeleton for the bottom part of the body. This is what we developed as well. I think that's about it. I'm done. Well, thank goodness. I don't know, Vitaly never interrupted me, so that's why I kept going and going. So it was interesting. So it was brilliant. And I have several short remarks on this topic. So let's start with the automatic rifle. So you assembling, disassembling that, but I work with ballistic missiles, rockets. So you assemble, disassemble that. We all have this legacy. But when I served in the army, I'm not going to tell you what I was doing there. But anyway, case I liked that example with Cambrian explosion. So a Cambrian explosion happened for the species of Homo sapiens. So we know that it has been in existence for 5 to 7 million years, and it had many subspecies, Pithecanthropus, Neanderthals, etc. 40,000 years ago, just like he talked about eyes and that they multiplied greatly because they got eyes. So 40,000 years ago, the evolution of the brain led to the fact that our lobes became larger and speech appeared. So there was an explosion in communication. So those guys who were able to talk to each other, they're called Cro-Magnons. It's ourselves. So we've been around for 40,000 years. After that, we started building states, empires. We produced capitalism technologies. Now we're moving towards, at very fast pace, at this hybrid civilization. Like there was a hybrid between services and industrial robotics. You remember that curve of artificial intelligence? Now maybe it's an ant right now, but very soon it will achieve the level of Einstein in terms of thinking. Maybe it'll take 50 years, maybe 100 years, or maybe 150 years, but it's still seconds on that scale. So we're becoming a hybrid civilization even now. So machines become part of our industry, then they enter our homes. So personal robots become more and more common at home. So robots enter all types of activities now. And Albert had a presentation. It was an introductory, broad speaker. So following speakers will be covering more specific cases, more focused. So they'll 15 minutes max for each speaker. So Alexei, please tell us about your products. Thank you very much, colleagues. May I? Can you switch the slides? Can I switch the slides? So we also studied rockets in the military department, MK-14, and then .U rocket. So that's classified information. I will not be discussing it. So one point on what Albert already mentioned, I wanted to share my opinion. Should be afraid that robots will replace humans. So I have a different perspective on this. Depends on what you would call a robot. I use a robot to download a robot, to call upon a different robot, which is 90%. It will not need a human. It will be driverless, will take me to the airport. Another robot will be maybe 7, maybe. So I take a plane, and most of the flight is guided by a robot. I come back home, and robots make food for me. And I brought from San Francisco robot that opens your wine bottle for you. So I think robot depends on how you define a robot. I think robots are all over the place around us. I think it's a good thing. In our project, PromoBot, which I have a pleasure to present to you, I have 15 minutes for that. So today I can talk about the fact that I think many of you have heard of it already. If not, this is a chance for you to see it for the first time. This is a robot that ran away from testing grounds from the developers in Perm. So I will cover that later. So this project has been around for 2 years. It was, the idea came in 2012 when I attended several events and I realized how people were interested in robotics. You may have large aircraft, ships, and they may be impressive, but when people see a mechanical arm, it really catches their attention. So we need to use them. So they are fascinating for us. So I put together a team, and in about 3 months we developed a prototype. On the 4th month we were able to sell it, and 4 months later we sold 16 of them. So we got a payback on our initial investments. We won Generation S competition as Russian venture companies. In 2015 we presented a second version of this robot. It's really a success story. In February of 2015 we presented it, and by the end of the year we had over 100 of those items produced. We shipped them. We produced them ourselves. So design, the body, software, and boards, and so software, hardware, 70 to 75% of it is produced by us in Perm, in our company, PromoBot. So we were well trained. We went through different accelerators. We were able to develop that across the country. We have 13 representatives across the country, including and also abroad in London. We have 5 robots in the London Museum of Robotics, where that robot went wild. In Ireland, in Prague, in China. So they ordered 100 robots from us. We signed that contract in Hanover in Germany. So when we had this official ceremony of signing, and said, so now Russian producer represents, will be selling robots to China. Like, what? There's people going like, what? What was that? Russian manufacturer sells robots to China? Really? So that's a robot. It's about 1.5 meters in height. It's fully autonomous. When you turn it on, it can detect where most people are located. It can converse with you. It remembers faces. It recognizes faces, stores them in their database. Cognitive engine is also was developed by us. It's a cloud solution. Can you imagine 150 robots in the country, and 100 in China, and 5 were shipped, and 13 are operating abroad, and so they share the same cloud. So we use the opportunity of cognitive, of deep learning neural networks. So database is very important for us. The larger it is, the better. So we have some already have accumulated some potential, and those robots provide data for that database. So the project in and of itself is called a Russian designer kit, because we real residents of Skolkovo in 2015 we gained the status, and we think it's a very good collaboration, very good synergy, because this face recognition service is a third-party service from another Skolkovo resident. Last week, by the way, they were able to sign this. It's called Regional Labs. So it's a platform for implementing startups, Skolkovo startups and others, like face recognition is one example, or navigation system. It doesn't make any sense for us to work on those. We can use other third-party solutions for that. Or we went to Детский Мир store and they said, that's great, But we need to have a robot that works not only for 8 hours, but we need one that works for 12 hours. Okay, we have a Skolkovo startup that can develop an accumulator battery for it. Okay, that works this way. So same thing. So that helps other startups to develop and get orders. In terms of language options, so we were focused to get ahead. We will be presenting a third version of PromoBot, most likely in October. So initially we were focusing on the global market. So we already developed Russian, English, and Chinese language options. So we're almost done with the German language, and we're planning to add Spanish, French. So that's a case that you understand there's a lot of demand for it, but we're not selling it for a wow effect. So those robots do what all promoters do. So like the first of those robots was selling flowers in a real shop chain. So in the first week it achieved 270%. So they could not believe it, like, wait a minute. So what about Swiss chocolate? Like, people are not buying it, but maybe let's have a robot sell them. So their sales also increased by 25 to 30%. So we do not know all the things about how people respond to robots, but how people, they say like, oh, a robot is worse than a kitten. If a robot asks for something, not all people can say no. They say like if you buy a rose, you will smell good, just as the flower. And so, I don't know, people respond in different ways. Sometimes they come back and buy those flowers. So this is something to study, and businesses have a lot of use for it. One of the cases that you can see here is when a robot has a printer inside, so it can print pictures. So you can say, okay, you can stop there. So a robot comes to a person and starts conversation, then asks them to take a picture. But if you give to a person their picture, they're not going to throw it away. They take it and keep it with them. So I have dozens of those pictures, for instance. So I don't know, people don't throw away their own pictures. So what is important here? It takes 40 seconds to print a picture, to print a photograph. So this is not for wow effects, but this is they make money, they generate income. So it takes only 40 seconds to print a picture. So the people will not leave. They know the progress. They see how it's going. So I'm out of time. You have another minute. A minute. All right. So on the whole, it's a great version 2 is quite good. It's a good robot. So statistically, for market specialists, it's very important. This male over 30, after 5 p.m., so they come to our robots to talk to them. In the morning, they come to them. So we have some stats, so that can be used for promotional activities. So we sold them to Sberbank, to Beeline, to Yakutsk municipal centers. So those robots give out passports to people, etc. So this is our map where we have our products, our footprint, some of our achievements. So we became a Skolkovo resident, Generation S, already mentioned, Startup Village. So we are there. Our activities after the robot ran away. I understand that I'm out of time, so I'm in the middle of my presentation only. So if you're interested, you can I can share more details with you later. So we are working on the third version. It will be presented in October, and it should be recognized. We want to be recognizable. So in 3 days, 315 international information outlets wrote about it, Washington Post and other. So when that robot ran away, so we had some testing grounds, and the engineer forgot to close the gate when he got back there from the lunch break. But the robot left. It went off to the road. A police crew came, so it stopped there in the middle of the road. And so what's going on? Just a robot, like in Perm, a robot on its own in the middle of the road. So why? And he got out through the gate. And I don't know why the Russian football team couldn't score, but the robot could do it. So I don't know. So I don't know if that was a plot on your part to have that runaway robot, or that happened on its own. In any case, that's a great story. So this idea to having a designer kit, it's great. We may have some technologies in place, but we don't know how to use them to make sure they generate income for us. A couple months ago, I read that McDonald's launched, I think in Arizona, a fully automated restaurant. So you can order on the screen, and everything is produced and delivered by machines. So it's no human. So it's tested by the end of the year. So the McDonald's plans to have 25 of those by 2017. So that happens really quickly. So I wanted to give the floor to Sergei Sergeyevsky, who represents MSC Software Corporation, only from Skolkovo. So Sergey, would you like to stay there, or would you like to come forward? So I will warn you when you'll have 1 minute left, and you have 15 minutes altogether. I wanted to bring your attention to the problem of developing robots as technical systems. So robots, it's an automated system used for production or other operations that operate following a program put there by people. So there was a story of this robot that needed a whole group of programmers. So that's about artificial intelligence. So of course it's about human intelligence of developers, because they develop this technical solution. So the outer appearance of a robot can be very different. So it doesn't have to be human-like or anthropomorphic. It's a technical device that is developed for a specific task. And robots, in a way, it's an object which is guided. It's a mechanism of a different level of complexity. It's also a control system that controls that mechanism. So you can compare a robot to an automaton. So those are similar mechanisms. And so the level of intellectual control, that's what makes the difference. So an automaton is a device with a limited or restricted or very restricted intellectual capacities, but a robot is a similar device, a mechanism which has higher level of intelligence. It can be fairly high or it can be fairly low. Industrial robots, those are used in the industry. We are quite familiar with them. We hear about them on television, in the internet. They should be very precise. So, like welding robots, on automated lines in the automotive industry, for instance, or maybe composites are put together when you produce items for aerospace industry, etc. So,
but these materials and these robots have limited intelligence because they also only have sensors and they have very limited decision-making process, but they have low level of artificial intelligence. Service robots are quite fashionable item today, and there are numerous ways of application of service robots, and they have relatively high level of intelligence. So the convergence between industrial and service robotics, what is it about? Just being, looking like a human being is not an attribute of a robot. It's not a qualifying parameter of a robot. And convergence between industrial and service robotics is needed only in a technically and economically justified environment. So here I'd like to refer you to the first speaker, who said that the border between service and industrial robotics is becoming very much blurred. And coming back to industrial robots, 50% in Japan, 20% in Germany, less than 1% in Russia. And service robotics market in some cases reaches 10% of the total industrial robotics market, and it is yet growing. So industrial and service robotics has to be viewed comprehensively. And I would like to tell you today about methods you currently employ to develop these robots. So talking about methods for developing these devices, I would say that we need to keep our Russian market in mind. We need to think about the issues which are currently faced by robotics companies on the way of introducing robots. Remember, I've given you the slide saying that Japan has 50% of industrial robots, Germany has 20%, and Russia has just 1%. So we have low manufacturing culture and low level of skills of people who are currently working at our manufacturing companies. Robotics is not a hot issue in our education. We have thousands of people. Sorry, you may, if you elaborate on this subject, you will not have enough time for your main presentation. I just wanted to mention an issue of technology and education in the context of developing those devices. Well, a robot is a thing to be managed. It is a mechanical component, and how do we put all these things together in one robot? How do we make sure that robot is properly controlled? And virtual computer modeling helps to speed up development of robots. And as an example, as an example of this computer modeling, I will give you this story. Development of a Martian probe, which in 2012 landed on the Mars, was almost unthinkable without computer modeling. So they had to model the functioning of all the landing systems. It was impossible to test this robot in our terrestrial conditions. So you could only get this experience from modeling. This is the robot which traveled at a distance of several million kilometers within 3 years, and it landed on the Mars. It managed to perform the same operation which were modeled on Earth with the help of computer modeling. And that robot was a combination of hardware and software. Another example also comes from aerospace. This is an American robot, and it is about building a new robot which will land on the moon and which will have to perform some operations on the moon. I'm struggling to start the video here. Probably I can skip it now. So we have some videos embedded into the presentation, but it doesn't work for some reason. Please help me to flip through the slides. Oh, there we go. So technical aspects involve computer modeling, virtual modeling, that speeds up development of robots and that makes development a lot cheaper. Previous speakers pointed out that it's still quite costly to build the hardware. It is indeed, and developing software is also costly. But we have thousands of robotics engineers who graduate from Russian universities annually, but our robotics is still lame. So we have an opportunity to offer our students and our graduates software applications free of charge. They will be able to run these software applications on their home computers, and they will be able to build computer models. Could you please help me to start the video? It's not working for some reason. But if you're interested, I can give you the copy of this presentation. Yes. You still have a minute and a half for your presentation. And I would like to draw your attention to the following. We have means, and these means are available to students, to individuals. They can use these means to set up a home lab, and they can build computer and mathematical models at home. They can model robotic behavior. That helps to provide more experience to those who graduate from our universities. They already will have experience of using software which is being used by FANUC or KUKA, so they will be already experienced in this perspective. Should you be interested in getting access to these software applications, please don't hesitate to ask me. That's generally it from my side, and if you're interested, I come from Messi Software. It's an American company. I'm from Moscow office. You have my contact details, and if you're interested, please contact me after the presentation. Thank you. Thank you very much. So, dear colleagues, we have a roundtable discussion here, and I think that it is probably too late for us to talk about robots, because that will be a clear issue for our kids. We will not have to explain it to our kids what a robot is, because our kids will be seeing robots as an integral part of their environment. But we're too old for that. But we have people here in the room who are paving the way for better understanding robotics by our kids. We have Pavel Frolov here, who is selling wonderful robotics kits which train our kids how to use robots. Dear colleagues, greetings to you all, and I would like to touch upon several things which are barriers for our country on the way to becoming a leader in robotics. And the key barrier, I think, is educational system, as our educational system is not educating, but is emulating education. So it's not about teaching people the right things about robotics. Current educational system is more like a black box, because it teaches our kids to use ready-made modules, and these modules should be then used for making up projects. And our engineers become very much dependent on supply of different components from abroad. That relates both to hardware and software. So our educational system is not churning out engineers. It is churning out users with experience how to use this or that application, or how to use this or that module. So we have this issue both on the level of pupils and students and on the level of teachers. We have very few teachers now who are capable of explaining to kids what is the actual significance of these technologies, simply because these technologies are black boxes. The source code is a black box, and the architecture of these systems is also a black box. So if we want to get to a brighter future where service robotics and industrial robotics are converged together, and if we want to be in a situation when all the labor is done by robots and human being will be more engaged into creative activity, we have to dramatically change the situation. And in order to change the situation, we decided to do the following thing. We have introduced the idea of free software and free and open source code software and hardware. So you can disintegrate our hardware and software bits, and you can have a better understanding of what they are made of. So you can go all the way down to a single byte, trying to understand how our software is built. And the same goes for our hardware. So we have developed a very comprehensible system, which and we can start. We start teaching kids this system from 5 years years old when they start reading, and we're going all the way up, all the way through to 25 years old when they become capable of buying components, then using 3D printer to manufacture mechanical parts, then build their own lab, build their own CNC machine, or build their own 3D printer and present it as a project. Now we are offering these educational solutions to our educational system and to international educational institutions, and we are facing a number of challenges. The first challenge is the lack of proper qualified teachers, and that can be a serious problem. And if it becomes global, it can turn into an unresolvable problem. Like in Russia, there is currently a need for 90,000 teachers more. And it remains unclear how we can do this, because teachers don't want to teach robotics. And it is impossible to find the teachers on that scale, in that numbers. It is a challenge for us. So we went beyond the borders of Russia, and we have applied and won a grant from Google, and Google has given us funds, like in previously mentioned case with DARPA. Google has provided us with funding. We've also won a grant, we've also won funding from Finnish government, and we are currently manufacturing our robotics kits in Finland, and we have tested them in Finnish schools, and we are selling them all over the world through our Finnish office. And since last year, we have become Skolkovo residents, and we are getting a lot of assistance from Skolkovo. And late last year, we won an award in the nomination of Exporter of the Year. We got an award for a Breakthrough of the Year, just for that recognizes our efforts in getting access to international markets. So, and this is what we have done. We decided to build a robotic club network, and these clubs will provide people more information on robotics. Our educational system has a lot of momentum, and it's not flexible enough. So we decided to work out the educational program for that. We have a 3D prototyping program, software building program, and we are offering this program on a franchise basis. We have marketed this as a product in April this year. We have already sold 20 contracts, 20 franchise licenses to Russian customers. We also sold it to Kazakhstan and Belarus. We have potential customers from the Baltics, from Finland and China, but we are currently working on translating our methodology on different languages. And as previous speaker pointed out, we have already sold some of our products in China. So yes, it's a true story. Russian developers indeed sell products to China, and I hope that there will be more of such cases. I am calling for other startups to do the same. So we provide our partners with all necessary things needed to start the robotics club: the methodology, the business system, techniques for building the HR pool. We provide them with a business book, brand book, and methodological guidelines. We provide 72-hour training courses to teachers in our training center in St. Petersburg. And we are also actively working on building up our teachers pool. If now we take a look at the number of people who are professionally involved into teaching robotics, it's just mere 500 people. These are those people who are doing something on a serious basis. This is just 0.5 percentage points out of the total number we need. So that means that we do face a challenge with availability of teachers. And so if we duplicate our educational system by means of introducing these robotic clubs, that will help us to resolve this bottleneck situation. I think that's it from my side. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Okay, one question. Microphone, please. Microphone. Innopolis University. Innopolis University bought a franchise from Carnegie Mellon University, and that this is a university from top 5 technological universities of the world. They have spent up to $20 million for developing of the methodology, and Innopolis methodology is one of the best in the world. Unfortunately, it still has some disadvantages, those which I have outlined before. It's more of a black box. So we have no idea what is inside the microcontroller. And we have no idea how can we build all these small components. They teach people to use ready-made parts and components. So it's a good methodology to train an engineer who is capable of using spare parts. Thank you. Just one more comment along the same lines. I really liked your example about robots and kids. When we made the first presentation of our robot in MTI, kids liked it a lot, and they started to interact with the robot, asking questions. Hello, how are you? What's your name? What are you doing here? Then we saw the same kid coming up to a water cooler and asking a question, what's your name and how are you? Probably in 2 years from now, water coolers will start talking to kids. And yeah, those kids who are used to work with iPads, when they open up a book, a conventional book, they try to use this gesture, spreading their fingers in order to enlarge the image. Here in the audience, we also have a person who is very important for entire robotics area. He is the member of the board of a very influential organization, or International Federation of Robotics, Mr. Bauer. I would like to welcome you here, and would you please say a couple of words about what you've just heard and what you have seen here today and the day before? Just provide us with an outline of what you think.
Thank you very much. So, going around the world, seeing the robotics development in industrial robotics and service robotics, for example, in Taiwan, Korea, Japan, China, Germany, I'm very impressed what we heard here today. especially from Albert. So I think there's no doubt that Russia could become the leading country regarding robotics in future. And what we heard also just now with the young generation, we are also speaking about the Generation R. Generation R means Generation Robotics. So this will be our kids coming in the future and working with robotics. Like today, the young generation is already working with the internet. So they don't have an understanding that there was a time before internet even. They don't know about this. And there will be the Generation Robotics now coming. So what could Russia hinder to become #1 in service robotics or in the robotics field, industrial and service robotics, professional service robotics, consumer service robotics? So if you look to the industrial robotics, we see when it was starting in the 70s, 80s, so it's only still a young industry, only 40 years old. When we started there, people were thinking that robotics are taking away jobs. This was in the 70s, especially in the automotive industries in the 80s. What we see now, looking back, and that's the experience we have, is that it created more jobs, that people have not to do dangerous jobs or dull jobs. So this was with the industry robotics, and I'm absolutely sure the same thing will happen with service robotics. So it will increase our lifestyle, it will increase wealth, it will increase the growth of the economy, and people will work to it, and robotics will become friends. I'm absolutely sure, and we can prove this looking back. There was the same things when the car was invented 100 years ago in Germany. There was a law that a man has to go in front of the car waving with red flags and warning from this dangerous car. And people were talking about what are all the horses doing, what are the people doing working in the horse business and so on. And we see it was a success story. The same with industrial robotics. People saying it was thinking it was taking away jobs, but it was creating jobs, more jobs than ever. Every from us now can, or most people can afford cars. If cars are built manually, no one can afford cars. It would be in the price of a Rolls-Royce still today. So also this will come on now with the service robotics, with the industrial robotics, and with the consumer service robotics. So I'm sure for this. And listening to Albert and all this panel discussion with these examples, I'm sure Russia will be a bright future in this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So you said you did a good job. So on this positive note, we come to a conclusion to this roundtable. It's an interesting topic. It's an expanding topic, and we just get started on this. So I thank the speakers and thank you, the audience. So we're coming to, and let's applaud our moderator. He did a great job.
the